Happy Sunday. Happy Lord's Day. I just returned around 1 a.m. from the San Joaquin Valley area and got to make it to Yosemite yesterday for the first time in my life. So it was unspeakable. It was literally awesome, stunning. I'm basking in the wonder still of Yosemite National Park. So thank you to a dear friend of mine who I met at UCLA at the freshman orientation, her freshman orientation. We're 2 years apart. And her name's Raina. And I was manning the table for Christian students on campus, or Christian students club at UCLA, trying to gain the freshmen, as we've talked about in some videos. We being myself, Robert Taylor, and some others who have talked over the last couple years about the local church's strategy to gain the freshmen off college campuses. Raina came up to the table, and I remember leaving that table and the name Raina staying with me, just praying for Raina. And 30-some years later, Raina and I are still very close. And anyway, my school had an outing in Bakersfield, so I went to that, and that was on Thursday. And then, by the way, on my drive up from Los Angeles to Bakersfield early Thursday morning, I got a wonderful phone call from someone by the name of Diane with MK, or Missionary Kids Safety Net. Wow, she gave me a lot of really good resources, but I told her about the teaching that you don't speak about any leader's sins in this group, the local church / the Lord's Recovery / Living Stream Ministry, because they use the teaching about Noah being naked in his tent and drunk, and how his son Ham did not cover his father, but rather spoke about it to his brothers, and how that resulted in Ham's son Canaan being cursed. And she was stunned. She said, wow, I thought I've heard everything, but that is new and crazy. So she wrote, I am rarely surprised when it comes to abuse, but it left me stunned when you told me about cover the spiritual problem, and if you don't, you'll be cursed. So I just want you to know that that's an objective, really dear believers' take on the teaching about, quote, covering Noah being applied to covering up sins, otherwise you'll be cursed. And she recommends, I'll actually put a few recommendations from their series and ministries, and I'll put those also in the description of this video. So thank you to my sister Diane with Missionary Kids Safety Net. So I drove up from Bakersfield to Fresno on Friday and got to meet again Raina's sister and stay there. And Raina and her husband met me for dinner, also stayed over at her sister's home, and then we went to Yosemite after a breakfast, an amazing breakfast at La Enchilada, which is a restaurant owned by Raina's mother-in-law. And she and her husband are the cooks. Amazing huevos rancheros. So if you're ever in Fresno, go to La Enchilada. Okay, so I'll show a few pictures of Yosemite. I'll add those to these videos and just share with you a little bit. I felt our Raina and my talk, especially on the way back from Yosemite, was really precious. And I'd like to just share with you all a little bit about that. she said she thinks she's watched all my videos and loves the church, loves the believers, and so do I. And so that's what, I mean, we had no discrepancy in our feeling. The only thing is that she personally hasn't experienced abuse, and she still is able to meet with those believers, at least in smaller ways. Not necessarily the big meetings, but gatherings, 2 to 3 or more. Anyway, so I do want to make it clear that my heart is never, ever to discourage the gathering of any believers together in the Lord's name. That's the church. Ecclesia, the gathering of called out ones. Whenever 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I, the Lord said. How can we not want such gatherings? So Raina asked, what could have been, what would you have liked the brothers to do? And if you're not familiar with the terminology, the brothers would mainly mean probably elders and senior coworkers. Related to my situation, what would I have liked them to do? And my answer was just not to tell lies. I would add this, I don't know if I said this to Raina, but not to believe lies. So to seek the truth, and then to also support the law. When lies have been told about me, elders just went along with those lies, I guess. They didn't confront the lies or the liars. And when I have confronted lies in this group, I was told I'm on the wrong tree. And so there's part of the doctrine of this group that enables lies, because saying you're lying to me can be, if you recognize someone is lying to you, you can be shamed for being on the wrong tree, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and that you're not on the tree of life. But again, I'll say it over and over again, the tree of life does not have unrighteousness on it. And a fruit of the Spirit is love, which does not lie to one's neighbor, joy, peace. You don't have peace lying. Long-suffering, goodness. Goodness is not on the wrong tree. It's the fruit of the Spirit. Anyway, so not to lie. There have been lies told and perpetuated by leaders in the Lord's Recovery, the Living Stream Ministry, the local churches. So don't lie. If you have lied, or if you have participated in lies, repent. Just apologize, confess, repent. Don't respect persons. Don't, so I would say, and Raina and I talked about this, don't require loyalty to any man and any specific ministry unless it's just the ministry of the New Testament, which is the Bible, the New Testament specifically, but the Bible. It's not a certain man that you need to follow above and or at the exclusion of any other man other than Jesus himself. And then obey the law. So if you know of a wife being locked out of her home, that's illegal. You don't tell the wife, well, it's good he's still initiating contact with you. Or it's clear that your husband still loves you. Or if he's saying that he'll kill himself if you don't get rid of your dog, well, get rid of your dog and you'll know what Jesus can be to you in that area. That's not legal. That's coercive control. Killing oneself is illegal. They can be held. They should be held for 72 hours. The person being threatened that their loved one is going to die by suicide should not be beholden to do what that person says to keep the person alive, or to even please that person, because they're being coercively controlled. So obey the law and uphold the law, and require your peers to uphold the law in whatever church scenario you're in. That's what I'm asking for. Upholding the law also includes not defaming people. So if you see that in your publishing company's writings there's been defamation of character, such as writing the book Fermentation of the Present Rebellion, but not recording the facts, that the brothers that are being labeled as rebellious actually were concerned about repetitive, habitual sexual immorality of a leader in the group, the manager of the Living Stream Ministry, Philip Lee. If you're aware of that, and that is omitted from the book about how these brothers were somehow rebellious and conspired a rebellion, repent for that, and apologize to those brothers if they're still alive, or to their families who are still alive, to the church who was misled, and to any brothers and sisters who have expressed concerns about this and have been also called rebellious or quarantined or called evil or people of death, etc. Just obey the law. That's what I'm wanting. The basic law to be obeyed, and then also the Lord's word to be obeyed. The 10 Commandments: don't lie, don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't have any idols, worship only the Lord. And all of this can be summed up, yes, with love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. All of the commandments can be fulfilled in those two. But that can be a little bit nebulous, so if you are in doubt, there should not be dishonesty toward your neighbor or about your neighbor. If there's dishonesty, intentional dishonesty, then that's not love. If there is forbidding of a wife to be in her home, that's not love. Love one another and hold one another to the level of expecting love. So anyway, just want to share a few scenes from Yosemite and thank Raina for the fellowship. I told her I'm so happy if you're able to meet with believers who call themselves whatever. If they call themselves the church in Fresno, wonderful. If they call themselves Shepherd Church, wonderful. If they're not dividing themselves from other believers by their name or by their doctrine and their attitude, and by sin being covered up, sin will divide. Sin divides believers because oneness is of the Spirit, and the Spirit and sin don't go together. So anyway, I'm rambling a bit. Just want to give you a little report, such a precious time, and to just invite you to share any responses. If you still meet with the church in a certain city that considers themselves the local church, Raina and I both agreed no church should be deemed as illegitimate based on what they call themselves, or legitimate based on what they call themselves, but that the church is the gathering of called out ones. You're gathered into his name. There the Lord is. And there should be so many gatherings of called out ones, of lovers of Jesus. And how dare we call some legitimate and some not legitimate, especially based on the reception or rejection of a particular person's publications that are at charge, that cost money to people. You either subscribe and you're considered faithful to the ministry and legitimate as a church, or not. That makes no sense. And then especially it should not harbor predators. A group that calls themselves a church should not harbor predators, protect perpetrators of crimes, and shame victims who speak out, or witnesses who speak out, or just concerned believers who speak out about such crimes, sins, mistreatment of others. I am editing this, wanted to add the way that people, the world, knows that we're his disciples. And I would say that we're his church, that we're his body, that we're God's people, is that we love one another. Love does not defame. Love does not sexually assault. Love does not lie. Love does not expect other believers to adhere to one specific publication company. Love does not call other believers who aren't identified with your group as being degraded, etc. Love does not take credit for certain teachings. If they're from the Bible, give the Bible credit. You don't need to uplift a man as someone who recovered that from the Bible or whatever. Give the Bible credit and just follow the Bible. Love one another. By this shall all men know they are my disciples, if you love one another. And he even said, you love one another as I have loved you, as Jesus loved us. He did not make the requirement, all these things that the Living Stream Ministry, the Lord's Recovery, the local churches' teachings have made requirements. Just love one another as Jesus loved us. I have to say that I feel really sad for the believers who meet down the alley from my home and who knew me well and who walk past my house and sometimes see me. This morning, a couple that was really, really close to me. In my undergrad years, they knew Raina, I would say probably quite well. And anyway, I know their children very well, and they know my children very well. And they were walking past my home this morning as I was throwing birdseed out into my yard. And I let them know I saw Raina this weekend, and I went to Yosemite. And a dog came running out from our house who is owned by one of the young men who live here. They said, "Oh, do you have 2 dogs now?" "No, this is Brandy. This is Jackson's dog. He lives here. He's lived here since like May, I believe, or June. It's now November. They live just about a block away. They're not in my life. Is it because I'm not going to their meetings? Is it because I'm speaking out about sin? It's so sad because they're super dear to me. And this is just one example of, I would say, thousands and thousands of examples among those who stop meeting or start speaking out, that they lose family, friends, neighbors, the family, friends, and neighbors who identify as the church, that suddenly you don't even know who lives in my home, that kind of thing. That's just the norm with this group. There's something wrong there. They cooked for my husband when I wasn't allowed in my home, but now I'm here, and they have no idea what's going on in my home. I guess because I'm not going to their meetings. So, thank you for listening, and I hope you have a blessed day. Take care.